Hello and welcome to this session of the CSI Secret Store meeting. It is January 20th, 2022. As a reminder, this call falls under the CNCF Code of Conduct. And if you want to familiarize yourself with that, please visit the repo and read the Code of Conduct markdown file. And with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. Looks like we got a pretty short agenda from what I'm seeing. No announcements, but I know this has been brought up in several last meetings. So we're definitely going to get a poly out to do a survey on when we would like this meeting to occur, if this time is good or if it's not. So let's just go ahead and get a vote out there and see where that lands. With that, let's see. We'll go right down to you, Nalek. We got an issue, looks like here.
Yeah. So actually, it's an old issue. I think if we can open it, you can see. But then this is the particular issue actually Tom had opened. This is about running the provider's non-root. I mean, as a non-root user. And actually, we got like a similar issue. I think it was in this week, where one of the user was looking for if we can run the driver as a non-root user as well. So I just wanted to sort of bubble this up. I'm not sure if we had like I'm certain like might be some discussion in our community meeting, but I just wanted to sort of bubble this up again and see what everybody thinks, or what was our thought process behind this, or what we discussed, things like that.
Yeah, I think the same user also opened the issue on GCP provider, and then I was discussing this with Tommy, right? So maybe for the provider today, the root privileges are only required because we need to create and bind the socket. So if we can find a way where we don't need to be root user for that, I think we can do that. Because right now, all the providers return the files to the driver. They don't write to the file system anymore, so they don't need any root privileges in that way. So it's only for the socket purposes. But in case of driver, we still need to be root because we need to perform the mount operations and then write to the file system. And I think there are two aspects to this, right? One is there are certain scanners, like image scanners, which scan just the vanilla container image. So if you don't set the user directive in the Docker file, then those scanners basically flag the image saying there is no user directive, this is running as a root, right? One way to circumvent that we have been doing in some of the projects is setting the user explicitly to some other user, like some 64,000, 63,000 something. And then in the YAML file, you can actually set it to run as a root. So we can see if that works. So that is one thing where it will circumvent the issue where images, just the vanilla images are scanned and they are flagged. But the second point, coming down to running as root, that is still required for this driver, at least, just because it needs to do the mount operation. And that's what I think.
So for the first option that you mentioned, right? I think if we scroll down this issue, right, I have sort of linked those two issues together. In that new issue, the user had exactly the same problem. Like I think their image was flagged because some scans. So what you mentioned, right? Should we just have it as default, I guess, like this kind of thing, or meaning like in our driver image, we can do that. I mean, we can set it explicitly, and then we will update our YAML and Helm charts. Probably is that an option basically?
Yeah, I think that will be good. Like I think in general, right now, also the recommendation is to have the user specified in the Docker file. So that will definitely like help with this issue, right? But again, we just have to make sure users know that it's still running as root. So like we can still document it and say, hey, look, even though we set the user there, we also set run as root to 0 in the YAML file, just because this driver needs those privileges to be able to do the actual functionality.
Right.
I would. I'd rather not add complexity to make the linters happy. Or I think kind of adding a non-root to the Docker file, but then running as root is kind of like, I think that adds cognitive overhead when like, if the result is it's running as root in the cluster, I think it's better to be kind of just like upfront on that. But there may be ways where we can have like other specific capabilities, or yeah, I'm not sure if there's a way to have kind of a non-root user that is able to manage mounts, volume mounts, right? Like that's the main thing. I think the Unix sockets we could probably get around by having user group world like readable writable on like the folder or something. So I just haven't looked into it to see if there's a way to get that permission, but yeah, I don't think it's worth it to change much if we're still going to run just as root.
I guess I'll come from a different angle. What is the what's the exposure or the risk here? I've not read through the issue, but I guess if we can concentrate on kind of why we would not want this to run as root and see what type of exposure, see if we can kind of just mitigate that part, if that makes sense.
Yep. So actually, I was going to ask this exact same question. So in this particular issue, what we are looking at is, right, user is, asking is like, hey, if we are running this as a root, then what possible security issues we can get into. So, I mean, I am okay with either idea with what Anish and Tommy suggested. But like, if we decided to not do any changes, then maybe we should at least add some kind of a documentation or some note per se in our docs was saying that, hey, we have to run as a root for these reasons, and this might be the potential issue. And honestly, if we look at that issue, I mean, I answered it like in a generic way because I'm not sure, or I have not came across any particular issue because of the root. So I just told them like, hey, we patch CVEs and things like that. But if we are aware of any past issues because of this, maybe we can document or something like that.
This does remind me, like, we were going to get a security review or like an external audit of the thing like a while ago. I forgot to follow up, or like, did that happen? Because I think that's
still
where this
going on. I think they're almost close to completion. Like I checked with them yesterday. They still haven't shared the results and all that, but it's still an ongoing process.
Cool, because that might be where we can get like good feedback on that, where especially on the alternatives of like if we are overprivileged just as a root, but that there's a way to make a non-root user have the permissions we need. I'm just not familiar enough with the like Unix kind of or the Linux specific.
Yeah, and also we can go back to the SIGOT community and also see if they have any recommendations for this particular one, right? Because I've looked at a couple of other CSI drivers and all of them run as a root just because of this mount privileges. So maybe we can go and see if there is a common way to solve this issue. And then like we can just work with SIGOT for across all the other drivers and do it. But yeah, at least in the Azure provider today, we recommend them, they deploy it in Cube system. So if they're using their CSI driver and provider, we just tell them that like, hey, look, these are all high privilege pods, and run it in Cube system, because that's where you have all your system critical pods running, which have high privileges, and then you can lock down that particular namespace. So we have that directive there, but I think having a parallel comment here in our documentation just to say why we need root, and then like Nilesh suggested, what potential issues that we are aware of. And then also, I think we already recommend running it in Cube system, so that we've already covered that base here. So we just need probably additional documentation.
Yep. Yeah, I like Tommy's idea as well. Like, I mean, one of the things probably we can do is just see what the audit results are. Then we might have like a comprehensive list, like what could be potential problem, and then maybe you can just add a note. Maybe does that make sense?
Yeah, and then if in the audit, if they have spent quite amount of time on driver and all the components that were listed, then the results will also be public. So we can always reference that too and say like, hey, look, all this was reported, we fixed it. And then like users can also be aware that in the older versions, what could be the issue.
Ah, perfect.
Right. Let's see.
Yeah, that's it pretty much. I just wanted to sort of bubble this up and check like what everybody's thought.
All right, that takes us to the end. Anything else anyone wants to bring up while we got the community call going?
We cut a minor release, it's a patch release last week, the v1.0.1. That had few fixes, and then like the CVE patches for the base image and all of those. And then I think we also discussed about having the 1.1.0 release towards the end of this month.
That on track? Got about 10 days left.
Yeah.
Nice.
And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to sort of just bring the thing like in Azure Provider, we recently implemented the file permissions logic basically. So like if user mention like they want to mount secrets with a particular file permissions, we sort of implemented that logic. I'm not sure like if other providers has that kind of request or not, but I just wanted to sort of float this.
Did you say that you've cut a release that does that?
I mean, we have not cut the release yet. We just like merged it yesterday, but following release of Azure Provider, we'll have that flexibility, I guess.
Okay, great. Yeah, I had looked into that on the GPC one, but have not merged anything for that. I think right, we had talked
It
about
was
this
like
one or two meetings ago, and I think like yeah, it's possible right now on profile, but there was something of like if we want the secret provider class to specify a default, then we might want to change the driver. But yeah, I think
so right now, like the implementation is pretty simple. Like we added like in the objects array, we added like another field called file permission. So like if it's mentioned, then the provider will try to return that file permission, what basically user has given. And if not, then just return the default file permission, which driver passes to provider, and basically the current flow. So like no
Right.
changes to driver or rather the schema of RCRD.
yeah, and the default permissions though right now are a command line flag, right? I think on the driver process, or are they hard coded?
It is hard coded in the driver.
I think like a starting point is I think users want control for each individual object, right? Rather than for the whole secret provider class. So this approach will be nice. And then if there is ever a request where they say like, I just want to define it on the secret provider class level, then we can think about the schema changes and maybe providing it in the driver.
One more thing, actually, I was discussing with Anish is like this potentially gives like a full control to the user, and they can set pretty much any permission that they want, which includes like full read, write, execute permissions. So it would be kind of nice to see user feedback on this and see, if there are any potential issues with that or are they good with it. So that's it. Sorry, Anish. Yeah, that's it. I was just wanted to load this.
Oh, that was good. Thank you for bringing that up. Oh yeah, the other one was, I think we talked about this the last time, right? So there's a user who has a PR open for the socket path. So like today we're using the /etc folder, and then he has a PR to move it to var run. And then I think on the last call we discussed that we want to support it in a backward compatible way. So we will search both the volumes. So I think we should include that in the 1.1 release. Phil, if you go to issues, yes, this is the one.
Yeah, this PR, right?
Yeah, this PR, and then there's also an issue 823. It's there, fixes 823.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You want this included in the 1.0 release for this month?
Yeah, we discussed about including this in 1.1 release, and then I think Tommy had suggested we should just ensure we do it in a backward compatible way rather than saying it's a breaking change and now users have to go and update both the driver and provider. So we can do this in a backward compatible way and then add this to the change log, and then we can tell users that going forward we will be supporting only like var run as a default instead of etc. And I think also we need to come up with a plan to see what the future for V1 Alpha 1 is for the API versions. I mean, we have V1 since 1.0. So we just need to come up with a plan to say when V1 Alpha 1 is deprecated, like no longer will be served. And then like I think that's it.
We can just put out a notice for that right now, right? Because when we did V1, it's like pretty much exact same copy, right? We didn't do any changes. So if we are not anticipating, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. So like if we are pretty much sure that we are not going to break this, maybe we can start the deprecation process, maybe.
Yeah, I think we need to see what the Kubernetes API deprecation process is too, right? So basically, we just have to follow that. Right now, we are serving both of it because it was only in this release that we added it. And then we just have to come up with a release number where we say we no longer serve it. So then if a user tries to create V1 Alpha 1, it'll start erroring out and saying, hey, just use V1.
Yep.
Yeah, not 1.1, but probably in a future release. But we just have to make sure we take that into consideration and do that. Otherwise, we'll end up maintaining V1 Alpha 1 for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was mentioning. So like maybe from this release or the release note of this 1.1, we can mention, or we can just see what we can start the deprecation process basically by telling them.
Yeah.
That takes us to the end. Good stuff. All right, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for joining. Our next call will be, I believe it's February 3rd. Again, we'll try to get a poly out this week to take a survey on the change of this meeting, the timing of this meeting. And with that, we'll go ahead and end the call. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.